I claimed I was innocent, but I've been secretly sneaking out to meet my ex in a secret bunker under my house, and before you call me a cartoon villain or a suburban spy, let me say this as plainly as I can. I'm Mara, 32, a structural engineer who spends her days convincing concrete to behave and her nights, apparently, convincing my conscience to shut up long enough for me to climb down 12 steps into a room that shouldn't exist. It started as a joke, the bunker. Not the sneaking, that's new and stupid, but the room itself. The house is a 1930s brick with ideas above its station, the kind of place that creaks like it's telling you the weather in Morse code. When I bought it, the inspector showed me a trapdoor under the laundry shelves, all nonchalant, like, "Oh, and here's your little prohibition mystery." The space was a root cellar once, then a storm shelter, then, if the penciled dates on the beam are to be believed, a teenage kiss laboratory in 1978. Pick your era of secrecy. I laughed. I polished the latch. I told people about it at parties, the way you tell people you can wiggle your ears. No one imagined it would ever matter. I say my house, but technically it's our house because there's also Noah, my husband, who thinks a good Saturday is fresh coffee and a clean inbox. Noah is lovely in the way a well-insulated wall is lovely. He keeps out drafts. He works in compliance for a biotech startup, which means he's a professional. Are we allowed to do this? Man married to a woman who turned that question into performance art. We met 3 years ago because my firm was hired to retrofit his company's lab floors. He wore blue socks with tiny lighthouses on them and made me laugh with a joke about load-bearing puns. There was comfort in him and steadiness. I said yes to that. I said yes to a life that would not collapse under its own weight. And then August called like he always does, without a ringtone, just a memory that shows up louder than the room. August, yes, that's his name, and no, he wasn't born in August, his parents were theater people, is the ex I thought I had put in a museum. He used to be a journalist who lived on espresso and boundary issues. Now he podcasts about corruption with the kind of voice that makes people forgive him for using phrases like "let's unpack this." Years ago we were ready to set a city on fire together. Then he chose a story over us the way he chooses oxygen, and I chose burnout over becoming a character in his monologue. We broke messily. I changed my hair and my number. I built things that did not require applause to prove they would stand. If you asked me in polite company, I would tell you I do not miss intensity. But polite company doesn't knock on your phone at 1:07 a.m. with a number you don't know and a text that says, "Mara, it's me. I need a place to talk." Not a public one. Polite company doesn't include a second text that says, "Please." Here's the thing about being an engineer, you develop an allergy to vague risk. My brain starts drawing diagrams. Worst case here, load path there, emergency exit in neon. I should have blocked him. I should have typed, "I hope you're safe, I cannot help." Instead I typed, "My place. Not the living room. Be quiet." And then, because once upon a time in the reckless decade I dated a man who made enemies who knew where to find microphones, I went downstairs in my slippers, moved the laundry basket, lifted the trapdoor, and turned on the single bulb that makes the bunker look like a patient thought. The ladder is oak from a hardware store that's older than my parents'. There's a handrail I installed because I'm me and I don't want to die stupid. There's an old steel shelf with jars that still smell faintly of whatever people used to can in a world where time was longer. There's an outlet, I wired it myself, judge me later, and a rug that's too nice for a bunker because I believe in hospitality even when I'm making terrible decisions. When I say bunker, picture something meek, a room that knows how to keep its voice down. It isn't glamorous. I'm not glamorous. I'm a woman who alphabetizes drill bits. August arrived an hour later, wearing a hoodie pulled low like a child who thinks fabric is invisibility. He looked thinner in the way that people look when they've been devoured by a project. He smelled like rain and a train station. I opened the side gate. I didn't hug him. We moved like burglars, which is perhaps a truth to apartment. I took him through the kitchen and down the 12 steps and into the room where we were suddenly the worst versions of ourselves and also the truest. He sat, exhaled, and put his hands on his knees the way you do when you are holding in a storm. "I've got a source," he said. "They're scared. I'm scared for them. I needed to talk where it's not easy to overhear. I remembered you. I remembered the cellar. There are a dozen ways to tell you what happened next, and I have tried them all. The journalist came to hide a voice, the engineer provided a box. The ex-boyfriend found an old door, the current wife opened it. We set chairs on top of history and pretended that if we spoke quietly enough, consequences would be late to the meeting. We talked for hours. Not about us, at first. About whistleblower laws and redactions and what you owe the truth when you also owe rent. I warmed soup and we ate it with spoons too big for the bowls. He kept looking up at the beam over our heads where those pencil marks are, the height of a kid from 1961 to 1968. Somebody grew up honest here, he said, and I didn't know whether to laugh. He asked if I was happy. I said yes, so automatically I could hear the echo bouncing around my ribs. Too loud. Here's where I should confess the obvious. We didn't just talk about ethics and stair treads. August and I have a language we built when we were too young to know we were building it. It arrived as if the room had summoned it. He said my name like a violin note that didn't know when to quit. I used the joke I always use when I am about to do something irreversible. This is a bad idea, I said, like I was labeling a power switch. He said, all my best ideas started as bad ones. We kissed, which is not brave and not smart, and it felt like someone had finally unplugged the white noise machine I'd mistaken for calm. Every car that drove past the house was a siren. Every creak in the floorboards above was my marriage looking for me. And yet the bunker held. I wish I could tell you it was an isolated lapse, a single trespass brought on by adrenaline and nostalgia. That would be kinda. It would also be a lie. We made rules. We always do, don't we? Even disasters have guidelines. He would text first. I would only answer if Noah was at work or on call. We would meet in the bunker, never the kitchen, never the bed that knows my breath. We would not let the rest of the house hear us. We would not say the word love even though it was there, stubborn like a dandelion between the bricks. We would stop when the story was published. When the story was safe. When something external told us that danger was over. If you're keeping score, that's 3 deferrals and no plan. If you're keeping score, I've already lost. Someone will ask why not tell Noah. Someone will put on their kind voice and say, you could have asked for a pause, for a separation, for a room to shout in. I know. I did the math of honesty and decided I couldn't afford the down payment. Noah and I had been static for months, no fights, no miracles, just the constant middle. We were safe. It felt rude to light a match in a room where nothing was burning. And then nights became coordinates. There was a cadence, 9:43 p.m., a buzz, 9:46, the gate, 9:49, the trapdoor sigh. Sometimes August brought documents I wasn't allowed to read because he is ethical when it counts. Sometimes he brought his fear and I held it while it kicked. Sometimes he brought nothing but the kind of loneliness that oils its hair and calls itself purpose. We spoke quietly. We made ridiculous tea. We argued about the shape of the world. He would read me a paragraph he wasn't ready to publish, the sentence structure like a man balancing a chair on his chin. I would show him my new sketches for a bridge retrofit, the line weights like a skeleton learning to stand. We were both aroused by competence. I wish that weren't so. There were moments of comedy so sharp they nearly bled. Once, mid-argument about whistleblowers, the washing machine above us lurched into the spin cycle and we froze, feral, as if the appliance were a chaperone. Once, a jar on the shelf released the memory of pickles into the air and we laughed so hard we had to cover our mouths with our sleeves. Once, I made a list of all the ways we could get caught and August wrote moral inventory at the top and put it in his pocket like a talisman against himself. Secret rooms breed imaginary invincibility. You start to think the rules outside are polite suggestions. It's not that I didn't feel guilty. I wore guilt like a backpack I refused to take off even to shower. But the bunker had a different gravity. Above ground, I was the reasonable wife. Underground, I was the person I had always been on my best nights, bright and ill-advised and fully awake. It is terrible to love 2 lives, the sturdy and the kinetic, and realize they cannot be spliced. Noah isn't a fool. He noticed the shadows. He noticed how often I went to fold towels. He noticed how I became meticulously kind, a classic tell. People think suspicion announces itself in accusation, but it often arrives as extra care. He asked once in bed, eyes on the ceiling, "Are you happy?" I kissed his shoulder and said, "I think I'm bored," and the relief in saying one true thing almost knocked me out. He nodded, as if I had reported a benign lab result. "We can fix bored," he said, the way he says we can fix compliance. We tried. Date nights that remembered to put on cologne. Games on the kitchen floor. A trip to Maine to look at water like it was news. For a week after we came home, the bunker was just a room again. I slept like a person who believed in clocks. Then August sent a picture, a photocopied memo with a black line through the name, a story like a knife, a caption that read, "Close." I felt the floor tilt. I texted, 1 hour. The night everything nearly fell apart, nothing dramatic happened. That's the horror. It wasn't a bang. It was a drip. Noah came home early from a shift he wasn't supposed to be on. August was already downstairs. I heard the garage door rise like a waking animal, and every hair on my arms became a sentry. I turned off the bunker light and stood in the dark with a man who knows how to hide information for a living, and neither of us knew how to hide ourselves. Noah's steps in the kitchen, the pause at the sink, the familiar clink of his wedding ring against the glass as he poured water. The silence after, which is how you know someone is listening. I texted Noah with hands that did not feel like mine, in the basement, checking the dehumidifier. A beat. Then, "Want help?" I answer, "I'm good." I don't know if it was the exclamation mark that saved me or damned me. The bunker became microscopic. I could hear August counting his breaths. I could hear the molecules in the wall rehearsing what they'd say if interrogated. Noah's footsteps approached the door to the stairs, the normal stairs, not the trapdoor, and stopped. "Thanks," he called, to the basement that was not the basement I was in. "For doing the boring stuff." And then he went upstairs to shower, and I sat down on the bunker floor all at once, like a puppet with her strings cut, and Cry laughed into my sleeve while August ran a hand through his hair as if he could comb his way into a better decade. That should have been the end. That should have been the memo from the universe. Instead, I told myself I was careful, which is a synonym for arrogant. We kept meeting. The story kept inching. The world outside kept being the world outside. I started narrating my life in the passive voice. Mistakes were made, lines were crossed, visitors were entertained by subterranean hospitality. If you've ever rewritten your own sentences while you're still living them, you know the peculiar fatigue of it. The night the story published, August didn't come. He called instead. His voice was steady and wrecked. "It's out," he said, and I could hear the newsroom hum around him, that hive buzz, even though he no longer belonged to a newsroom. "They're safe. We got them safe." He didn't say "we" like us. He said "we" like the people who decided to risk their lives for the truth. I felt small and proud and misarranged. Noah read the piece over cereal because life is offensive like that. "Did you see this?" he asked, spoon midi. "This is wild." I had to put down my coffee because my hands had turned into static. "I know the reporter," I said, which was a desecration of the verb know. He nodded, scanning, mouth twisting at the good parts. "I like the way he writes," he said. I almost choked on a laugh that would have sounded like a siren. I'd planned to end it then. To tell August the bunker was closed for renovations indefinitely. To tell Noah I wanted therapy that didn't have the word couple attached to it. To tell myself that all the receptors in me that once demanded combustion could learn to enjoy the slow, gentle heat of real life. Plans are excellent chore charts for your soul. They do not move the furniture for you. 2 days later, someone slipped an envelope under our front door. Inside, a photo of August and me in the alley by my side gate. Grainy but unmistakably us. No note. Just the image, which meant the note was "I see you." I've been in earthquakes. Not big ones, but the kind that make the cupboard shrug and you feel for a split second the human arrogance of thinking the ground is a promise. That's the feeling I had, standing in my kitchen with paper in my hand and my marriage above me like a ceiling that suddenly remembers it's heavy. I wanted to sit down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to become heir. I called August. I got one too, he said before hello. Different angle. His voice did a thing I recognized, preparation. We need to assume whoever this is wants leverage, not theater. They'll escalate only if we ignore them. I can't be a character in a blackmail plot, I said, the engineer in me offended by the melodrama. You already are, he said, and I sat on the floor because the tiles were cold and I needed the kind of honesty that chills. I told Noah that night. There is no version of this that gets extra credit. I put the photo on the table like an ugly dessert. I said his name. Twice. Then I told him the burdened truth, not all of it, not the sentence by sentence, but enough for the structure to be visible. There was a lie, there was a room, there was an old love that did not understand retirement. He didn't say anything for so long the kitchen clock seemed rude. Then, quietly, I'm not surprised. He stood, poured water, sat, took a breath like he was blowing dust off a memory. I've been pretending not to see how lonely you are, he said. I thought if I didn't say it, it would shrink. There are mercies so accurate they hurt. We talked. Not politely. Not with the fragile carefulness of people trying to keep their reputations. With the kind of words that break and then arrange themselves into something true. He cried once in a way I had never seen, and I wanted to hold his face, and I also wanted to step back, give his sadness a room of its own. He asked if I loved August. I said I love myself when I'm with him. Then I added, I love you because I do, and it felt in that moment like confessing an allegiance to two different weather systems. We did not make a decision that night. We made a list. Engineers and compliance officers make lists even when the house is sideways. We called a lawyer in the morning because blackmail doesn't care about your feelings. We called a therapist because neither does shame. We slept in the same bed and I dreamed of foundations cracking with the gentleness of bread. In the dream I pressed mortar into the fractures with my hands, and when I woke up my fingers ached. The person who slid the photos wanted money, of course. The lawyer told us to forward everything to the police and not engage. We did. The person sent 2 more photos, one of August in the hoodie, one of my hand on the gate latch, like a metaphor that didn't know it was obvious. They didn't get our money. They did get the part of my privacy I deserved to lose. August and I met one last time above ground at a diner where the coffee tastes like decisions. We didn't touch. He looked at my face like something he had to return. We're bad for the people we're trying to be, he said. I nodded. We were a story that had weathered too many edits. He slid a napkin toward me with a single sentence on it, You deserve combustion that doesn't burn down the house. I slid it back. Maybe I deserve a house that doesn't fear fire. We smiled in the exhausted way of people who understand that 2 beautiful sentences can still be wrong for each other. I told Noah I would move out for a while. Not as a performance of contrition, but because I needed to listen to my life without anyone grading it. He said, good, and I loved him for the courage it took to say it like a gift. I found an apartment over a grocery store that closes at 9 and smells like oranges when the sun hits right. I told the bunker goodbye. I stood at the top of the trapdoor and said, You were a place, not a salvation. Thank you for keeping secrets until I learned how not to. I left the light on for a minute on purpose, like a ritual for an era. What happened with August? He published more. He disappeared into the work the way people disappear into forests they know by heart. We text sometimes, with the kind of restraint that deserves a medal. He sends me photos of bridges he sees. I send him recordings of trains. We are learning how to be an echo and not an alarm. What happened with Noah? We are astonishingly kind to each other in therapy and astonishingly clumsy in the grocery store aisle. He brings me boxes of the cereal I like just in case you stop by, which is the sweetest scaffolding anyone has ever built for me. We may find our way back. We may not. I have stopped narrating the future with certainty. It doesn't like that tone. I am learning boredom again, the kind without fear inside it. I am building a desk that fits only my laptop and a vase. I am practicing telling the truth before it demands a bunker. If you want me to be a villain, I won't argue hard. I did harm and I did it with strategy, and that's worse than clumsiness. If you want me to be a heroine, I'm not available for the role. I didn't expose a crime or cure disease. I am a person who wanted to be alive enough to feel the voltage in her bones again, and I chose badly and then chose better, which is not an arc so much as a tendril. Sometimes late at night I imagine the beam in the bunker, the pencil marks of someone who grew without intending to. I picture future owners down there, finding the marks and making up stories about the girl whose name was probably Emma or June. They won't know that for a while the room held a different kind of growth chart, the marks of two people trying to measure their courage against their habits. They'll store winter coats. They'll keep paint cans. The room will forgive the lack of drama. That is what rooms do. That is what I am trying to do too. Would I do it again? The bunker part, no. The honesty part, yes, and earlier. The intensity, I'm learning to build it into my days without needing an audience. I run now, which is ridiculous because engineers hate inefficiency, but I like the sound my breath makes when the body is its own secret. I call my mother on Sundays and tell her things before she has to ask. I keep a notebook that says immediate truths on the cover like a dare. And I stand in my empty living room sometimes, palms on the wall, feeling how the house carries the load, and I think, this is what I know, where the weight is, where it isn't, how to let both be true without hiding underground. If you need an ending, take this one, the trapdoor still opens. It always will. That's how life works. But today I leave it closed, not out of fear, but because the room I'm choosing to live in has windows I can open with my whole hands, and the air up here, thin, unruly, ordinary, tastes exactly like accountability and something that, if you're patient, becomes relief.